Hello everybody. Before we dive into this topic, let me introduce myself a little bit. My name is Bas Jansen. I work as a PhD student at Delft University of Technology. I'm a member of the Spreadsheet Lab, working together with Feline. You see my email address and my Twitter handle on the slide, so if you want to contact me, that's possible. And then I would like to start with the subject. We live today in an era of big data. And yesterday I read a very nice quote. Millions of dollars yearly are spent in the collection of data with a fond expectation that the data will automatically cause the correction of the condition studied. Though accurate data and real facts are valuable, when it comes to getting results, the matter of presentation is ordinarily more important than the facts themselves. And you may say, okay, that's a nice quote, but what really surprised me is the date of this quote. It's a quote that's more than 100 years old. So actually, there's nothing new here. Second, what I think is very important, and I had to learn that the hard way, is that when it comes to getting results, the manner of presentation is ordinarily more important than the facts themselves. So it's not about the numbers only, it's also about how you present them. And although we learn in school how to write a report or how to give a presentation, little attention is spent on how to display and visualize quantitative information. And that's the topic of today. So let's have a look. One of the founding fathers, and Feline mentioned it also last week, is Edward Tufte. He wrote a very nice book that I would really recommend to read, The Visual Display of Quantitative Information. And he coined a term, he coined a definition, and the definition is the data-ink ratio. And data-ink ratio means that it's the amount of ink you use as a proportion to the total ink that is used to print a graphic. And maybe what would be a better representation of that is thinking like this. It's 1 minus the proportion of graphic that can be erased without loss of data information. Let me illustrate that with a little example. So we have a table here, and you see there is a very heavy grid around every cell. And the question is, does that grid tell us anything about the data that's in the graph, or in the table in this case? And that's not the case, so we should reduce that. And we can do that by making the grid less heavy. But what would even better is to remove the grid. Every line that we see right now has a function. We see the line under the countries. That's telling us that the 3 countries belong together. And below we see a line below the salesperson. That's to divide the table in a header and in a body. And at the bottom we have a grand total, and also there we use a line to divide it. So now the lines are not just some paint on the screen, but it is really useful information that's helping us to interpret the table. So data-ink ratio means do more with less. Use as less pixels as possible to get your message to the audience. So what are we doing when we're visualizing data? What we saw Feline do in the introduction was that immediately she went from the data to formatting the message. She selected the data and she clicked on Create Graph. But actually she's skipping a few steps there. And that are the steps that we're focusing on today. First, if you have data and if you plan to say something about the data, then actually you have a goal, otherwise you wouldn't do that. So be sure for yourself what your goal is. What do you want to tell about this data? And then the second question is, who's your audience? And what's your audience like? Are there very detailed people that want to have the 6th digit after the decimal point? Or are there more general people that say, well, just show me a graph? And if I know what my goal is, what should be my message then? What do I want to tell? And if that is clear for me, then I can start thinking about how I'm going to format the message. So when you're visualizing data, when you're visualizing quantitative information, Actually, we only have two tools that we can use. That's a table or a graph. Now, before I'm going to explain the difference for you, we have a nice little quiz for you to think a little bit about when you should use a table and when you should use a graph. So tables, you normally use them to look up individual values. Think about a phone directory. That's a very big table, and you use it to look up data, and tables are excellent for that. Another thing that's very handy in a table is you can really check individual values and compare them to each other. Tables are also very good if you need very precise values. Now imagine you have some kind of data set where you have kilograms and where you have speed. Try to imagine to plot that in one graph. That's very difficult because you have two different units of measures that you cannot plot on the same axis. So you need more than one axis, and it's very difficult to interpret the graph. So then a table is much easier to understand. Oh. And finally, if you have in your data set data on a summarized level, for example subtotals, and you have the details, that's almost impossible to represent in a graph, but it's very easy to do it in a table. So that's when you use a table. Now when would you use graphs? You use graphs if the message you want to bring to your audience is about the shape of the data that you have. Is there some kind of pattern that you want to show or some kind of trend that you want to highlight? That's really where a graph is very useful. And the other option is when you want to reveal a relationship between two data sets. Are variables correlated or not? That you can very well use a graph for that.